Good evening and welcome to Clayton Wilson's Field of Vision, the brand new podcast with Clayton Wilson IV. And if you don't know about Clayton, I feel bad for you because he's a fascinating guy. Clayton's career spans across engineering, aerospace, footwear design, automotive, aerospace consulting, you name it. And he has worked for some of the biggest names in the industry. He is a proud father of 3 daughters. We'll dive deep into Clayton's life, including his experiences working on the Shuttle, Challenger project, and his approach to designing shoes for top athletes, and a lot more. So without further ado, let's welcome Clayton Wilson IV to the show. Good evening, Clayton. How are you?
Oh, very good. Good evening, gentlemen.
Well, it's great to be here. And we've got one more as well.
Hey, Clayton, how are you?
Excellent. And yourselves?
Doing great.
Very, very well. Excited to jump into this finally. Long overdue. You know, we've been trying to get this date pinned down for a few months now, and it's nice that we're finally getting the opportunity to do this. Now, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm thinking we start at the most logical place, at the beginning. And in doing so, we're going to throw a few questions at you, and these are meant to be thought-provoking. So what I want you to do is dig deep and really give as much information as you can, and it's going to spark conversation. We've got a list of questions on our end, Clayton, like I mentioned, but with these podcasts, more often than not, the list gets tossed aside, which is what I'm betting is going to happen here too. Tell us about your early career in the aerospace industry and your involvement in the Space Shuttle Challenger project as an inspector for Ford Aerospace.
Yes, I had a reputation as one of the top inspectors in Silicon Valley. I was the receiving incoming materials inspector for General Electric, and I was referred to them through specialty job shops that represent certain specialists, the best in the industry. So I was called in on that particular project. At the time, NASA was in trouble with the financing from the Senate and the Congress, because of some of their mistakes with the Hubble telescope and some of the other fiascos.
Right.
And so they were desperate to get that Challenger to go. And I told them, okay, if I'm going to look at this, with the most important part of that was the seals. And I told them, I need the finest equipment that you have, and I know you have it because you've got Ames research with the wind tunnel tester and all that. And so I said, I need an electron beam microscope. I need to see down to the millionths of inches. I need to see the defects. I need the records on the materials and the curing of the mixture to make the seals, which, by the way, were from China. Mm. So I was already suspect to that. So.
Yeah, right.
Naturally.
And Clayton, how did your attention to detail lead you to notice the potential issue?
What I saw was too many defects, too many micro pockets, and the seals needed to be complete. The mixture, as I tested it, it wasn't mixed right, and it wasn't cured right, and that's what led to a lot of the bubbles and things of that nature.
Right.
And so my attention to detail started from drafting as an early drafter. And I had to show engineers the proper way to draw the blueprints, because some of the pieces got messed up that you can't rework, such as titanium, things like of that nature. Once you mess that up, you're done, as far as our current technology is concerned. But that was some high-end stuff that I looked at the blueprints and said, no, this is improperly drawn, and I see why the mistakes were made. And I consulted with the design engineer, and he backed me up saying I was absolutely correct.
Right.
And that was a high-level meeting between the CEO and the manufacturers. And I stood my ground, and I won, of course.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a pretty big flaw to identify.
Yes, and part of it was the communication between procurement. They should have kept a better liaison with engineering to make sure that the current blueprints were at that company. I also insisted that manufacturers had their instrumentation calibrated properly, because I found a lot of mistakes being made, and I did save companies a lot of rework, and they were very appreciative. And I said regular inspections needed to be done. The surface plates, all your calipers, micrometers, and all that needed to be done. And I said, since I was DCAS level government inspector, I said, I will be back every 6 months, and I will check the records.
Yeah.
And then this is how we keep the manufacturers honest.
Right. So after working in engineering and aerospace, you transitioned to the athletic apparel and footwear industry. That's quite a pivot, quite a change there. What's the story behind that? And can you share your experience as a footwear designer for Nike in the late 80s?
Yeah, I didn't want to be a specialist in any particular industry. I wanted to have a very broad expanse.
Yeah.
At the time, the jobs were scarce, and the more that you could handle, the better employability you were.
Sure.
And so I tried something different, and my main thing, and I waited for that job, I think it was 8 months. Mm-hmm. And I was on a cruise ship when they called me. You got the job. Right. And at the time, I was going to run for governor of Oregon, so I was in that whole president's club.
Yeah.
That, okay, I'll be there, just hold my job when I get back, which they had to do. They didn't want to do that, but
right.
I was a 3D specialist, but they put me in the 2D department, which was kind of like, and I showed up.
You were punching below your weight then.
Oh, yes. I corrected a lot of their formulas, which were incorrect, for things like the toe spring formulas and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And other than that, Clayton, what were some of your other responsibilities as a footwear designer at Nike? And could you elaborate on your involvement in the design, manufacturing, CAD conversion, and blueprint submission processes?
Okay, the designers did the sketches, and then we had the mold makers that made the stuff out of clay, and then the drawings were scanned and put together, which I thought was kind of a backwards process. I was trying to explain to them that the CAD, they should have started it with the 3D to begin with, because you can extract the 2D from the 3D. And not a lot of people understood the 3D CAD at the time.
And by the way, let me cut in for just a moment. Speaking of people not understanding, just in case there's anybody out there listening who's not familiar with CAD, it stands for computer-aided design, and it's
Correct.
the use of computer-based software to aid in design processes. CAD software is often used by various engineers, all different types, and designers. So, sorry, Clayton, go on.
Yeah, yes. And so they weren't using the CAD to its fullest extent. They used another system for the 3D, and that was kind of self-defeating in itself. And so we wasted a lot of time, messing with splines and trying to correct, the gaps between the actual sketches, because, at the time it wasn't that good. There was a lot of patchwork that had to be done, connecting the entities. And then once we got that done, and then the detailing, the designs were quite intense, and so there were 2 engineers per shoe. One would take the upper half of the shoe, and one would take the bottom half, which would have the airbags. It was a huge book on the whole design process, which kind of blew me away for designing shoes. It's not as simple as you would think.
Yeah, I can believe that. It seems like it would be more elaborate, more complex than meets the eye.
And the other thing was I knew the different spies from the other companies that were kind of, from Adidas and stuff like that.
Sure.
And some of the jobs that they gave me were to steal a design from Fila,
Yeah.
from Monica Seles,
Wow.
and to make it all look like Nike from camera angles, which is like, okay, yeah, that's a little against my religious views, but
Yeah.
okay,
So
and so I did that.
when you see sneakers nowadays, whether you're just walking down the street and you see modern sneakers on people's feed or on TV or whatever, do you ever look at them and just think, oh, I was responsible for that part, or I understand that, I see how that happened, oh, it's interesting how that evolved? Do you ever think like that when you see sneakers now?
Oh yeah, it's kind of wild. You start looking at people's shoes and wondering,
Yeah.
that's the other thing, and I noticed the one competition that was kind of making Nike a little afraid was Skechers. Okay, see, on a couple different levels, their designs were kind of interesting, and their price was reasonable.
Yeah.
See, whereas Nikes were kind of out there, see, unless you were an employee. And even then, they were still pretty expensive.
Sure, yeah. You were involved in the development of the first shoe cleats for modern day baseball.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
that go?